Hello, everyone. Welcome to Transform Now in our weekly pulse check on AI and automation news. I'm Michael Marchuk,
And I'm Brad Hairston.
and I am going to be going through the next few articles with you, Brad, because I think we've got one very serious one to kind of go through, and then a few that are more on the lighter side. So we'll start with the serious one first. This comes from AmericanProgress.org. And, I'm not a big fan of talking about politics on our podcast at all. In general, I don't like to talk about politics. But this one here describes some of the regulations that both our country and the United States, as well as other countries, are grappling with. So this comes from AmericanProgress.org, and the article is titled "Regulating AI in the Evolving Transatlantic." It's easy to say this. Regulating AI in the evolving transatlantic landscape. So the article really goes into how the United States and the European Union are approaching regulation, obviously in a slightly different way. So maybe you can lead us through that and not get tongue-tied like I did.
Yeah, and when I first read the title and started reading the article, to me it looked like a pretty interesting article with a strong point to be made about, hey, let's not just all devise our own approaches to AI regulation. Let's get together and do it in unison. And as I read the rest of the article, it did take a pretty strong, there's a heavy political bent to this, and largely because it's written by Dr. Alondra Nelson, who was part of the previous U.S. presidential administration, the outgoing administration. In fact, she architected the AI Bill of Rights, which you and I have talked about. I think we did a session or two talking about the Bill of Rights. So she's right in the middle of the thick of things as it relates to regulation and kind of the initial steps that the U.S. has taken. I did find the article interesting, because we've talked a lot on this podcast about regulation. This is the first time that I've seen someone through an article advocate for shared leadership among countries to establish kind of a global framework. However, when she starts to go into it, she basically says, without using these words, that there's significant headwinds because the US and the European Union are going in completely opposite directions. With the new presidential administration in the US, the goal is less regulation, go faster, make mistakes, fall and stub your toe and bump your chin. That's okay. It's better to go fast than to not go at all. Whereas the European Union continues to implement more and more rules and regulations and safeguards. So it's aspirational at best. She pretty much concludes by the end of the article that this is something that may never happen as long as we have the current leadership teams in place in these countries. But she does believe AI policy must balance innovation with democratic safeguards, with thoughtful regulation. And she does see some room for collaboration on certain things like key AI risk, like biometric surveillance and things like that. So, even with the different approaches, she thinks there's some things like that different countries can agree on. So I understand her overarching point. The one thing that was interesting to me, Michael, she doesn't mention China at all. And that's crazy because a lot of the talk right now about governance and government intervention and privacy and all these things revolves around China, not as much the US or the European Union. And so I think that's a pretty poor omission from her point of view. She doesn't mention them one time. She just talks about the U.S. and European Union. But anyway, and then she mentioned at the end of the article, she's also not thrilled with the U.S. and their plans to integrate AI into the government operations. Of course, probably a lot of that has to deal with Elon Musk leading the charge. But anyway, interesting piece, definitely a different take than many that we've read before related to regulations. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, I think when I read through this, I felt similarly. I mean, they are such worlds apart in terms of the current U.S. Temperature for
Yep.
regulation and the European Union. But to your point about excluding China, excluding India, and excluding some of the larger organizations, Japan, this ends up looking to me like it needs to be a global consortium of some sort to come to some sort of agreement on this, because technology itself it won't understand borders, and we're going to get into a situation where we have sort of a GDPR kind of thing where my data stays within my country and is handled by the servers and management or applicable laws here. And I don't know or necessarily care what you do with your citizens' data on your side of things, which again, that us and them is probably the biggest issue about all of it is how do we manage this where it's not an us and them, but it's just like a standardized version of this.
Exactly.
I'm not sure we'll ever get there, but I think that's going to be one of the biggest roadblocks right there is just understanding how we can approach this in a sort of collaborative way. So good article. Again, a little difficult to read from my perspective based on the political nature of things, but we'll move on. Our second article is from Wired, which of course is right up my alley because this is the kind of stuff that I like to read. The article is called "An AI Customer Service Chatbot Made Up a Company Policy and Created a Mess." So Cursor, they have their chatbot, and they're happily providing some customer support. And interestingly enough, it described a policy that didn't exist. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah. So Cursor, for those that don't know, is a code editing software. And this whole incident began when a customer of Cursor, who, by the way, has a Reddit name of Broken Toaster Oven. I like that. Broken Toaster Oven noticed that while swapping between devices using Cursor, the application just terminated. It just shut down. So he goes out, he reaches out to a chatbot on Cursor. Cursor comes back. This person named Sam, I put that in quotes, responds, "Oh, well, that's a policy. We only support using it on one device at a time." This user goes and researches it further, finds out that Sam is an AI persona, not a human, and that it made up that policy. It doesn't even exist. So congratulations, Cursor. You're now the latest example of AI hallucination, which also the article says are now called confabulations. Crazy that the human language will never be the same from the AI age. So confabulations continue to persist. They continue to create potential business damage. And just another example of AI doing what many are calling creative gap filling. So AI models on their own invent plausible sounding but false information.
Yep.
So for companies deploying these systems, especially in customer facing roles, which, Michael, we know is one of the biggest use cases of Gen AI and in terms of interfacing with customers, the consequences can be significant. And this is just yet another strong proof point that about the dangers of ungoverned AI, really any form of AI, agentic or otherwise, chatbots that are leaning on LLMs to create a response to a customer issue. They're more capable than ever, but the responses themselves have got to have some form of governance and review. And, how easy would it have been for them to have that safeguard in place where, okay, here's a response to go to the customer. Let's check it up against our existing policies and let's make sure that this is real before we put this out in front of a customer. They didn't have anything like that in place. And so we know the results. So this is, it's humorous on one hand, but it's frightening on the other. It just cries out for more safeguards, more governance. And I think until that is in place, and that's commonplace, we're going to continue to hear about stories of this nature.
Yeah, I agree. And to me, it sounds like the interaction sounds like somebody who if you were talking to a person, an actual person named Sam, and they came across the same thing, it's almost like they got lazy and said, instead of me looking it up or trying to figure it out, I'll just tell them that you can't get there from here, and maybe they'll just go away. Take the lazy route out of it. So it's very interesting to see how this worked out.
Yeah, definitely.
So our next article is from TechCrunch. This one I thought was very interesting. Article's titled "Famed AI Researcher Launches Controversial Startup to Replace All Human Workers Everywhere." That doesn't sound like a problem to me. So this particular startup, Mechanize, decided that there's a possibility that they could launch a full automation of all work to have a fully autonomous economy. What does that mean?
Well, it means that the person who claimed that is going to get a lot of hate mail and drop off of a lot of Christmas card list. And so that has happened, as you would expect. The gentleman behind it, his name is Temay Besiroglu. I'm sure I'm saying that wrong. He is a Dutchman who earned his PhD at Cambridge, and he's also spent time at MIT. Very, very smart guy. He's very young, but he's smart. He's done a lot in the field of AI, and he's known as kind of he's a famous AI researcher. He does a lot of writing and speaking, and people cite him a lot. So he focuses on the intersection of economics and computing. And he started this new company, which, as you said, aims to have to support full automation of the economies. Now, if you look at the numbers around this, and the article talks about this, it's absurd. So U.S. workers are paid about $18 trillion per year in aggregate. If you look at the world, it's $60 trillion per year in aggregate. So even if you automate, 0.0005% of that number, that's a big number. Of course, what came to my mind, I'm sure it came to yours too, Michael, is if humans don't have jobs, they won't have income to purchase the things that AI agents are producing, right? I started thinking about that, and sure enough, the article later mentions that. They said, where does the money come from? And the Siriglu has come back to, after getting hammered for probably 24 hours straight. He did clarify that he's only focused on white collar jobs. He also argues that this will enrich humans, not impoverish them, because it's going to create vast abundance, higher standards of living, and new goods and services that we don't even know exist today. It's very pie in the sky, and we live in an age where people make claims like this all the time. It's just kind of par for the course. But this guy, he's obviously smart. I agree with the spirit of what he's saying, which is the less robotic, the less mundane work we do, the more human we can be in the things we do. I'm like a broken record on that point, as you know, Michael, and World Economic Forum has supported it with, surveying company leaders who identify the skills they want. A lot of them are human. They're human, intrinsically human skills. So leaders are not at this point saying everything we need from our labor force can be digitalized and be done by robots. But this guy's out there saying, nope, let's go for broke. Let's automate the entire economy. So more power to him. You're never going to win a popularity contest making a claim like this. I think that seems to be the sharp, tip of the spear. I mean, there's companies now. I saw this on social media today. There's a company putting out billboards that say, don't hire humans anymore. You need to use AI to do what to fill those roles in your company. That's getting a bad response too. So, clearly these smart people don't hire a lot of PR or marketing people to help them with the way they position their predictions and their ambitions. But I guess we had examples like this all the time throughout history.
We do. And as we look at this, I mean, again, I think there's a shred of truth in where he's going with it, and that a lot of humans do a lot of ridiculous things because of the systems that we've put together to be able to track and manage and deliver all of those goods and services that we're working on right now. The reality is that there's without people doing it, there's not going to be anybody to buy these things because we're not going to have the funds to do it. And the other thing is there's no purpose behind it then too, because people are innately creative. Even if you don't think you are, it's very likely that you have some creativity and you have the desire or need to express that in one way or another. So by taking that away, even from this fundamental way, you're denying humans what they're kind of designed to do. So interesting idea. Not sure it's ready for prime time for sure. So, and our last one is another a fun one here from New York Post. Article's titled "Saying Please and Thank You to ChatGPT Costs Tens of Millions of Dollars," according to OpenAI CEO Sam Altman. So that pretty much summarizes all of it. But tell me what you think about it.
Well, let me ask you: do you say please and thank you when you prompt ChatGPT or any large language model that you use?
I never say thank you. So I am not thankful to the AI for producing what it asks.
Please sometimes you throw.
I will often say please because it's sort of to me, it's how I would write an email to somebody. I'm expressing myself, and I started off that way rather than a command to do this, do that.
Yeah.
So
I do that. I do that in my communications with humans. I'm very careful always to be very courteous and use please and thank you and all the right levers to be courteous. For some reason, I have had no desire or even feel the inclination to be courteous to a large language model. In fact, I would say I've become more curt in my prompts than I was initially, because I appreciate the fact that there's the context, that it understands. If you start down a trail, with questions, it understands how it can build upon those and not replicate answers and what have you. And I've learned that you don't have to give it this elaborate, long, courteous sentence to take the next step. You can just use a few words. What about this? Or now this, or what, and it will act on it. It's not waiting for you to say please. It's not waiting for you to talk to it like a sensitive human.
But
with
evidently, a lot of people do say please and thank you if it's costing that kind of money, right?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm shocked by that. In fact, the article mentions a survey that was on this topic, and 55% of the people surveyed said that they believe politeness in prompting AI is ethically correct. 55%. So I'm shocked by that. I was also shocked by what the article said about one of the design team leaders from Microsoft Copilot. Pilot phrasing actually creates the setting for a more constructive and professional session with the AI. In other words, it does matter. It's how the AI responds. I'm still not sure about that. I mean, I know there's some models that pride themselves on being more emotionally intelligent and being more sensitive to the humans that are interacting with it. So maybe it plays into that, but I just have a hard time believing that ChatGPT cares if they thank you to it or use polite language. I mean, I'm not like cursing at it or criticizing it based on the responses I get. I'm just trying to constantly fine tune the prompts and add more detail if necessary, or in some cases less, like I said, just to be as curt as possible.
So, no, I understand that.
Yeah. So I think it's a funny observational, article about the fact that by saying thank you, by saying please, it's costing money. ChatGPT has even quantified it, or OpenAI has quantified it. And of course, people then say, well, this is bad because, these LLMs are run on extensive computational infrastructure in data centers, and those centers are using precious electricity. And so this is another example of why AI is bad. But then it says globally data centers, and I would assume that's all, not just AI data centers. They account for 2% of electricity consumption. That doesn't sound like a lot to me. Do you think that number? Well, I mean, I would have expected it to be a lot bigger. I don't know if it's 100% accurate, but yeah, to me, okay, it does cost some money, but I think OpenAI would rather have people using their model and saying please and thank you than going over to Claude and using their model or Google or any of the other 10,000 models that are out there. So pretty humorous article in total, and I'm sure it's not going to change a whole lot.
It probably won't. But what's interesting to me is, and I'm sure you've seen the videos out there of the robotic dogs, or Atlas, the bipedal humanoid robot, and the way they test them. They don't test them politely, right? They test them by beating them.
Yeah.
How can you make you fall over? Because they want to make sure that they're able to accommodate all situations. And evidently these situations include being abused. But I think that's part of the way that we are seeing a different kind of interaction, whereas we see these physical robots as things that we can push around. When we're interacting like we have now for quite a while with email and chat, just chat between humans, whatever, it becomes very normal for us to express ourselves through text in a way that we want to communicate. So making that transition away from that, because it's not a human at the other side of it, is like you said, you've become more curt when you realize you're talking to an AI versus a human. But I think for most of us, as we start out, it's very likely that we'll start out as if we are talking with a human because of the way the interaction naturally feels.
Yeah.
So agreeing. Well, anyway, those are the 4 articles we have today. As you know, we have links to all of those articles in our show notes. So if you want to go form your own opinions, we'll leave those links for you to read these articles yourself. So until next time, I'm Michael Marchuk, and thanks for listening.